Okay, our ticketing and electronic waivers group. This is kind of interesting because we've got a great group here that takes things in three different directions. So this will be a good challenge for me. First up, from Ticket Socket, who was also a great sponsor of ours today. Thank you very much for that. Ticket Socket is revolutionizing the way companies use ticketing for events. They're pioneering a new level of interactivity and customization for event promoters, venues, developers, and ticketing companies. Keel Blake, tell us a little bit about yourself and Ticket Socket, please.
Sure, yeah. Good afternoon and hello again. Thank you for having us here. Like I mentioned earlier, this is our first time. So I'm based out of Orlando, Florida. The company is based out of Newport Beach, California, but we have team members all over the country, based out of California, Hawaii, New York, Michigan. And we got our start in the race registration space, working in nonprofits, but now we work with one of the industry leaders, Spartan Race. And then we moved into time ticketing, museum ticketing, attractions, time bookings. And then we recently, in the past 3 years, moved into seated venues. And so we work with concerts, with live sporting events, and we're announcing right now a large partnership with FIBA, the International Federation of Basketball, working internationally. So thank you so much for having me here. Based out of Orlando, I also teach at UCF Sports Media and Technology. So I love to talk tech and sport business with anybody here. So thanks so much.
Very cool. Welcome aboard. Another regular at the Racetrack Business Conference. I think you've become like our unofficial lawyer expert. Laurie has worn many hats in this business, though, too. As a matter of fact, I think you were, not adverse to parking campers and doing whatever it took.
Not at all.
But a former executive VP, senior VP, and general counsel of Charlotte Motor Speedway, she really understands every aspect of the motorsports industry. A founding member of the Apollo Sports Law Group. Let's welcome Laurie Eberhardt.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Can you hear me? It's not working. Test. Now it's on. Okay, got it. Everybody in my family knows that I'm a loudmouth, so I can do it really well without the microphone. But thank you, Dennis, for that welcome. I'm Laurie Eberhardt. I am a sports and entertainment lawyer and do a lot of deep concentration in motorsports companies. I've been in the motorsports industry my whole entire life. I've been a lawyer in the motorsports industry my whole entire career. And I get the call from a promoter, a sanctioning body, anybody involved in the motorsports business, and they say, my business lawyer really doesn't know what I'm talking about. And I said, I get it. I understand it. And so we help a lot of motorsports companies figure out their risks. So I'm happy to be here, happy to be part of the conference, and happy to get to know a little bit more about Ticket Socket.
Our final guest comes from Winston-Salem State University. And by this time of the afternoon, I can't even read my own writing. Located in the heart of stock car racing country, Winston-Salem State University has a terrific program to prepare students for the motorsports industry. And our next guest is an assistant professor there and the coordinator of their motorsports management program. Also has done a fascinating study that I can't wait to see the results of. It's Clay Harshaw.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm at Winston-Salem State University. Some of y'all might know where my office is. I'm actually looking out over Turn 4 at Bowman Gray Stadium.
Woohoo!
Unfortunately, they'd kick us out on race day. Otherwise, I'd work every Saturday during the summer. I wouldn't get any work done, but I'd be there. What Dennis alluded to is some research that I've been working on for a little while on what it costs to go to a drag race or to any kind of race. But specifically, one of the things I looked at was NASCAR. So we'll get into that in a little bit.
All right, Laurie. It seems like we ask you this from time to time. We need an update on where we are in the state of the industry legally with electronic waivers becoming a big deal.
Yeah, thank you for that pitch right up the middle. I'm happy to say that we're finally to the stage at an industry that we have a solution for our paper waiver process. So anybody that's worked at Backgate, anybody that's done anything in speedways and signing these liability waivers is a pain in the backside. Our current paper system was developed, and it's worked really, really well for years to protect promoters and anybody involved in the sport from liability. But just like anything in life, whether it's global warming or it's your business plan, you need to evolve or die. And so our paper waiver system has finally evolved, and legally, the legal profession has finally come to a point where they say, yeah, we've got a system that works for digitizing the electronic waiver system. So all of you that are promoters, and you know what happens when you've got, again, the paper waiver system, and there's an accident at your track, and it comes in, and you call your registrar, and you say, so-and-so got hurt, go send somebody to find the waiver. And then you've got the intern that's back in the storeroom that's going through all the file cabinets, and they're trying to read all the signatures to find John Doe's signature and make sure that that person signed in, because that waiver's key to protecting the promoter, the sanctioning body, all the competitors from any kind of legal liability. But it's a system that it's time to move on. So we've been working with, and it's one of my clients, full disclosure, we've been working with them as our legal counsel, PitPay. Frank, you want to wave your hand? As Frank has spent 5 years doing research, detailing out, building state-of-the-art technology that, number one, meets the legal requirements, because if the electronic waiver system and the digital system doesn't meet the legal requirements, nobody's going to use it. And the insurance companies are going to say, we're not going to use it, we're not going to support it, so nobody's going to use it. So number one, it meets the legal requirements of what's needed for waivers as far as signing them, saving them, storing them, but also it solves that pain point of the huge registration line, you know, an hour before the garage opens at 30 minutes where everybody's trying to get into the back gate. So what it does is, first let me talk about the legal perspective, because that's where I think for me it's got its most significant value, is we did the research on the waiver law in all 50 states. Now, the law for waivers, it's individual by state. It's different in North Carolina than it is in Indiana, than it is in New Jersey, than it is in Texas. It's all different. Some of the states say, sign a waiver, case closed, there's no liability, you get a summary judgment motion, we're not even going to hear the case. If you're unfortunate enough to be in New Jersey or Virginia or Texas, the state there says, for public policy, we're not going to enforce the waiver, so then we get to going into the evidence and getting into other forms of discovery. The waiver in those states where it's not admissible to defend against liability, it still is admissible to show that that competitor or that person assumed the risk. So it has some other values, even if it's not 100% enforceable. So what has happened with PitPay, the electronic waivers, it meets that legal standard. It authenticates who the user is. It authenticates that the fact that the user has read through the release, because that's a big defense. So you get people say, I didn't read it, I didn't sign it, I didn't know what I was signing, I didn't know what I was doing. So the technology captures all that information to show that it's that person that signed it, that the liability release was read through, and that it's authenticated, but also that data is captured and stored, so when the accident comes, rather than going to that storeroom looking for that paper waiver, you just type in John Doe and all the evidence comes up. Then you give that to your insurance carrier and say, here's, you know, the evidence that we have a properly executed waiver. So it's solving a legal problem. It's also solving your back gate, because you can sell these passes in advance. And I think it's a real game changer for our industry as far as it's easing people in the back gate and then capturing that technology. So I wanted to point out the system that's there. So the good news is we've finally got around to accepting electronic waivers, but it's taken 4 years. 4 years ago, I was at a conference. There's this group, it's called the Racing Attorneys Conference, and it's 200 racing attorneys and everybody that practices in motorsports. And at that conference 4 years ago, there were insurance company representatives that were there, and they said, no, we don't think it's enforceable, it's not going to work. But finally, technology has evolved, and we've got a really, really good system. So yes, the right electronic liability waiver is enforceable. It's also going to be accepted by your insurance company. And I do want to call out Jeff Ladd and his group and Don DeWitt and his group at Real Media that worked with us in developing this technology and making sure that it meets all those standards. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I'm pleased as punch that we've gotten to the point where electronic waivers are enforceable, because you use them in other things. You go on the trampoline, you go to the Sky Show, they've got electronic waivers. It makes sense that we should have it here.
And we'll hear from Frank at the end of this session as we head to break. And also during our networking opportunities, please ask about the product and about the service. I think you're gonna find it quite fascinating. Keel, creatures of habit is a great way to describe track owners and operators. We've been doing it this way for 40 years. We ain't gonna change it. And same thing
with electronic
yeah,
waivers.
same thing happens to electronic waivers. So there's such a tie-in here. How difficult is it changing over from some old-fashioned system that I still see a lot of tracks using, where there's some old tracks that are counting stubs still, to a modern system such as Ticket Socket, and why should they make that change?
Yeah, thank you. So it really comes down to, again, just like any other change process management, it's being able to bring all the key stakeholders into the room and look at the customer experience, walk the journey of the fans that are coming through your track, and then identifying, do you have GA tickets only, so general admission, or do you have seated venue? How many events do you have a year? How many events do you have that are race versus the great events that are generating revenue for tracks that were just discussed in the previous session? So it really comes down to how easy is it to bring your team into the room, which I know becomes difficult, but that's where we come in and we lay out the questions. We've done this before. We've helped people transition over. So we walk the journey from the client experience, and then we turn it around and ask you questions to walk the journey from your experience. Trust me, we know. I've actually been on the other side of the table, working in operations, working in ticketing, and working for the sport team and the event organizers. It's challenging because this is your day-to-day operation. This is what you've known. This is what you rely upon for servicing your clients. And so that's where we lay out the questions and ask your team, and we get all of that information out up front before you make that change. So that's the one thing I'm going to advise is, I'm going to share a few reasons here in a moment on why it's important to change at this point with technology changing. But before you make that decision, involve your team on the front end. Our company wants to talk to your entire team before that decision is made so that we can answer all those questions ahead of time. But in today's world, we're looking at statistics where 85% of ticket sales are coming through mobile devices, and it's going higher and higher. And so, earlier in the sessions, I heard questions on how to tap into millennials, and that data may not be accurate in this industry, but it's trending in that direction as we tap into a younger audience. And so that's where I would say it's really important to invest in looking at mobile-first technology and solutions. And then the other side of it is investing in stewarding your community. Most of the tracks here, so by raise of hands, how many tracks here have 4 to 5 race events or less a year? By raise of hand. Okay, how many have more than 10 race events? Okay, so there's over 300 plus other days that you could be monetizing with events outside of that and building your community data, because every track here outside of the fans that are following the specific race series has your local community that's different. And so you can build that data through a software like Ticket Socket that comes in and you actually own your data. So we don't share that with any other groups. It's something that you can keep to generate experience around and tap into your current CRM systems. And so from a high level perspective, that's where the opportunity here is to build your data, decrease then the ticket fees. So when you work with Ticket Socket, we help you control your brand, your data, your fees, and your revenue. We come in and we charge a flat percentage service fee, and it's lower than the typical industry rate because it's almost like you built your ticketing system in-house. We're just the technology provider coming and we help service, help set up, but then you're able to monetize the ticket fees and really change that checkout experience to be unique to the events that you have. You can ask the questions up front and you have that control. So we work with you to outline that up front, and it's really a matter of just getting everyone in the room and taking those next steps.
Clay, my background as a meteorologist, I'm all about data. Whether you get the forecast right or wrong, you got to have a lot of data that you piece through.
As long as you say it's a 10% chance of rain, you're right.
This is the fun part about my job now because I get to read somebody else's forecast and blame them. But when it comes to data, we have to understand our customers in order to know how to sell to them. Why did your study, what was the impetus behind your study being done? And have you learned anything kind of curious as you're doing the research that kind of surprised you?
Yeah, the way this kind of got started was I got a phone call. I was at NHRA national event. I won't say what track. And I get a phone call from my brother who had brought his family. First time they've ever been to a race. And it starts off, where the hell can I find a drink of water for less than $5 deleted dollars? And I was working with some folks, and I said, just find me at this place, and I'll get you some water. And it kind of occurred to me is that, okay, he's already spent, 150 plus for tickets, about 200 for a hotel room, and now he's got to buy concessions. This is, a $500 to $600 event for him. And he's also a college professor, so he, of course, is making six figures that no one has ever seen. But I kind of started getting into it a little bit. And in stick and ball sports, there's a group called Team Marketing Report, and they started this thing called a fan cost index. And it's 4 tickets, 4 hot dogs, 4 drinks, 2 beers. And we know NASCAR fans do not drink just 2 beers in a family. A program, parking, I forget all of it, but it's like concessions and tickets, parking. This is what it costs to go to a ball game. And I kind of was looking at that some and thought, well, we're really different in NASCAR and racing because we're kind of a tour. We don't have a home team. So I think it was Jessica said earlier that they're starting to see that the majority of their fans or tickets being sold are coming from about an hour and a half away. Well, I can't do that if I want to go to a race at Chicagoland or if I want to go to Bristol, I'm pretty much going to have to stay overnight. And so I started kind of boiling down, what is the essential cost to go to a race? And it's 4 tickets, 2 adults, 2 kids, a hotel room for 2 nights, and parking. I've got to pay those. I don't have to buy concessions at most tracks. And so I started looking at that, and I looked at this year's numbers. And so the average for a NASCAR Cup race is right about $480. That's a hotel room, 4 tickets, and parking. The tickets are just $100. It's all in that hotel room. And there are some outliers. Of course, Sonoma is going to be an outlier. The research that is just those 10 closest accommodations. And Sonoma does not have accommodations like, Holiday Inn Express close by. It's going to be the bed and breakfast. That's $250 a minute anyway. But I tell you, the place that surprised me was Kansas City. Kansas has some of the highest hotel rates. And I can't figure out why.
I was going to say it's because of the casinos there. I don't know.
Well, that could be. I don't know. That was just one of the big surprises to me. I'm wanting to take this a little bit further, eventually try to figure out some sort of a model to say this is how much it needs to be. I think tracks need to really push these hotel industries. I'm sure accommodations lobby groups in the state capitals seem to be pretty strong. I know they are in North Carolina. 20-some years ago, they were trying to bring Major League Baseball to North Carolina, and they put in, it was like, well, this is how we're going to pay for it. We're going to have all these taxes, sales tax, accommodations tax, blah, 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 and tobacco tax, alcohol tax. In North Carolina, we're going to raise taxes on tobacco, not a chance. Strong lobby group. The only lobby group that wasn't really strong was apparently the restaurant group, because they were the only ones that couldn't get that tax taken off of it. And y'all see what happened with that. We have still have the Minnesota Twins and not the North Carolina Twins or whatever they were going to call themselves. But really, find ways to work with the hotels to bring that cost down.
Yeah, and I was going to add on to that is that, you know, it's ultimately the experience that we're talking about up here that the customer has, or your attendee or fan has in that purchase process. When they break that down, you said there's hotel costs, there's ticket fee costs, and so how can you walk that journey of your customer and make it simpler? How can you reduce the number of clicks or reduce the number of steps? How can you add the waiver management into the checkout process so that it makes it just one easy process through a mobile device that they can do while they're watching a race, and they got an ad that your marketing team is sending them to you know, they're excited about race day, and I'm now going to go buy for your event. And how do you make it that easy where there's less friction through that transaction and really make that experience transformational so that you can hold on to their data and create a one-on-one really relationship with that fan. And that really happens through doing that review process from that first point of contact of buying that ticket and really breaking down, like you just shared, the costs and understanding how can you reduce that a little bit.
Another thing, like you said, the ticket fee, the service fee, I think we need to find a way to add that into the cost of the seat. Instead of having that tacked on at the end of it, just put it in there up front and tell the people this is what it's going to cost you to buy the ticket. I've balked at buying tickets for different events. It's that added fee. It's like I've got 3 of my seniors here with me. They've had to apply for graduation. They've paid tuition for 4 years. Applied for graduation, and we tack on an extra $50 fee.
That stinks.
Why? Over 50, 4 years, we could have just upped the tuition to $12.50. Add that in. And it's like with tickets. I'll look at, I'll see a ticket price. Oh, it's $50, and I go to check out, and now it's all of a sudden $57.50. And it's like, well, maybe it's not worth it. That's one of the things too is, saying the value. Seth Godin is a writer in marketing, and he does these micro blog things. And one of them they put out a couple of years ago was, whenever somebody tells you they can't afford something, what they're really saying is that you don't have the value in it. They don't see that amount of value. And I think that that's one of the things where our fans start looking at it and it's like, is there really any value to go into the race at, or is the value $75? Is it $125? And we've got to try to start matching it a little bit better, what our value is.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one out there, and I'm not sure whether we're going to talk about waivers first or tickets first or both. But how do you build a system that appeals to the very techno-savvy millennial generation, yet doesn't chase away in the racing business? We got a lot of older fans and older competitors. How do you build a system for either waivers or for ticketing that can accommodate both of those groups and kind of mesh the old school with the new school and do it effectively?
You want to take that?
Sure. So I think it's by looking at the total experience and working to make it simple. The less steps, the better. And so, when we sit down with new partners, we talk about what information they're looking to collect up front. And then, this is unique to our system, but we're white labeled. And so it's truly presented in your brand. It's actually run through your domain as a subdomain, for example, tickets.yourwebsite.com. And so from an SEO perspective, they're now coming to your website to buy the ticket. It's now increasing the traffic to your website. So every single click that they make is being registered as traffic to your website, which is ultimately increasing your brand equity from an online perspective. And so that's where, from an experience standpoint, it should function on any type of device. And you have 3 options. You either build it yourself, you work with a white labeled solution, for example, like TicketSocket, or there's many other providers out there that have ticket selling marketplaces. And there's pros and cons to each experience, but what this opportunity allows you to do is evaluate that yourself and make the decisions that are important and unique to your track, because every track is different and every track hosts different type of events. And some examples of it's not just a direct relationship with your brand. If you're hosting other events, it's also you want to have some control over the checkout experience that they're now offering too. So that's really from an old school and new school perspective. You want to be able to have some control so you can tell the story, share the message, include brand sponsors that you have into that checkout experience. But ultimately, by making it simple, it's appealing to all audiences. And I would say the data doesn't lie. All demographics are now using iPads, iPhones, and are moving to more mobile solutions. So it really doesn't matter the demographic. It's all about the screen size and mobility.
I would echo that. My thoughts are anything that's simple, that's not too many steps that you can go see, and anything that's simple that I can't screw up, or my dad wouldn't screw up, and my kids can obviously figure out. But I think simplicity is the key, and I'm not the technological person. I'm just the dumb user that gets stuck in all those things.
I sometimes have to ask my 80-plus-year-old mother-in-law how to do something on my smartphone. So everybody is doing, like you said, everything's doing smartphones. It's really tough to find a flip phone anymore.
Yeah, I like those old suckers, but I still had to be kicked and dragged into a newer phone. All right, guys, it's time to wrap this one up. We're going to start with you, Clay. Final thoughts. And when is your study going to be available?
I don't know. I got the notification from one of these academic journals. It's Journal of Revenue and Pricing Management. It's from New Zealand. I had to get out of the country in order for them to publish something in motorsport. But I got the notice that it's been accepted for publication, but the publisher will let me know when they're going to do it. But should be probably within the next 6 months. Final thoughts? Find a way to make sure that your value matches your price. I think that's the biggest key to it.
Very cool. Laurie?
Check out the electronic waivers. I think it's the way we need to go as an industry, and I think it's going to benefit everybody, from return ratios for the insurance companies, but also from helping you on your back gate and also help it limit your liability. Really quickly, this is my little soapbox. The 3 things you can do to protect yourself from liability in the motorsports industry is, number 1, make sure you're incorporated. You've got an LLC or a business organization that you have. Number 2, buy insurance, specialty providers, motorsports insurance. We've got a lot of good options. Make sure you do that. And number 3, make sure you're having those waivers signed and you've got them stored someplace where they're not going to get ruined or destroyed. That's my final word.
How about electronic waivers? You got to back that stuff up, really?
Well, that's
good?
what I'm saying. Yeah, the same thing. Yeah, stored in. If you got electronic waiver, it's going to be stored in an electronic database and easily retrievable. If you're going to stick with the old paper system, put them in a fireproof filing cabinet someplace where you can find them when you need them.
Gotcha. And Kale, finally, wrap it up.
So final thoughts is focus on the experience, number 1, and then number 2, use data to look at your experience and see where people are having trouble, and then number 3 is look at the experience for your employees as well. So are your employees able to use the technology you're using easily? Because ultimately their ease of ability to use it is going to play out in the experience they're delivering to people that are coming to your track. And then lastly, if you focus on the experience, we're all trying here to bring more people to our locations, to sell more tickets. So by doing that and engaging your team, just make sure you give the proper timeline if you are considering making a change in ticketing technology, where you investigate and start that conversation about a year out, because you don't want to change leading up into the season. You want to change right at the end of when your largest event is happening. So if you have renewals in that, you can roll into renewals and you're not doing it during your busiest time of the year. So thank you.
Very good. The 3 things that we've learned from this group: Legal barriers for e-waivers going away quickly, although the laws vary by state, so keep up with the changes and have a good attorney who understands the sport you're in. Online is where more tickets will be sold, especially in the future. Maybe not as money now in the racing world as stick and ball in movies and other ways, but that is the trend. If Clay's can get help from an 85-year-old, we're all good. And finally, when it comes to cost of racing, work with the local community businesses to make sure that they're not gouging your customer, because they'll chase them away, and we'll see a drought for those hotels and restaurants and other businesses. And they just, it's the old adage of, can shear a sheep many times but only skin him once, and that's what I think we're seeing in a lot of the big time racing. So a big round of applause for our ticketing and electronic
Thank
waivers
you.
group.